what other kind of genres influence your story and what you put together? Are there any, like, do you have more romance elements? Do you have more humor elements? Like, how did it? Did any of those? Do you have any of those other influences in your genres for your story?
All of them. I
Mm-hmm.
I read as much as I possibly can. I listened to you and Brian talk about Red Rising.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of my favorite books, and Pierce Brown is one of my favorite authors, and he does a
Mm-hmm.
very good blend as well. So I've tried to incorporate sci-fi elements of the genre, if not the actual sci-fi. I try to incorporate a little bit of romance because I think that romance and family is part of life. And if you want a character that's real and characters that are real,
Mm-hmm.
you need to give a little slice of their life. I've got elements of military fantasy. I've got elements of historical fantasy. I've got a little bit of elements of the thriller genre because I think that you need to make things exciting and kind of take from those different styles of writing. I read as much as I can. With a little bit more limited time, like everybody else at this stage in my
Mm-hmm.
life, but I think that I let all of those things inform me, and I do my best to kind of learn lessons from them because in every genre there are masters of the craft. David Morrell, Jack Carr, um, you've got Anthony Ryan on this side of the house, Brandon Sanderson, Brian
Mm-hmm.
McClellan, Pierce Brown, and then you've got the old masters like J.R.R. Tolkien, and
Mm-hmm.
you learn from all of that craft, and I think you need to kind of weave all elements in from all genres. Everyone does something very well, and you
Yeah.
can learn from them, and it just makes a better story. One of our break-ins, Sam Paisley, he wrote the Elements of Time, and he has a really good saying, and I like to steal it from time to time. Everything is in service of the story,
Mm-hmm.
and so like that's how I think about it now. I don't have any ego in it. It's what makes it a better story,
Mm-hmm. I
and
love
if
what you
that's
said there about having uh, romance and stuff and those types of things in there to, like, even if the character isn't human, that's what helps ground them into something you can relate to.
yeah,
And everyone, has people that they love, people that they work with, people that they don't like. There's all those interdynamics with people, and finding ways to put those in there. That's what actually makes you connect to it's not really the plot. It's not really the plot is what happens to and around the character, but that those real moments are what actually make you love a character and connect with the character.
absolutely. Like, and I think that the biggest lesson I learned there was it's also your other characters. It's
Hmm.
not just your protagonist, it's your secondary, as they call them, characters. So, like,
Hmm.
two of my characters have kind of a subplot of, the reason they want to get home is they want to go see their mother.
Hmm.
They're two brothers, and they just love their family, and everything kind of leads back to that for them. That is their motivation, and you need to give people a slice of your character's life, which is going to be different and strange and interesting, and that's your job as an author, is to show them that these are people inside of your story.
Hmm.
And I think character driven writing is kind of what pushes us through a plot. And so I
Hmm.
do my best to make my characters interesting and give them motivation, and give them a story that is worthy of them.
Yeah. I just had a comment on a YouTube video recently. I'm not going to remember it exactly, but it was someone who was new to writing, and they were basically asking, like, you know, what's more important, plot or character, and how do you? I think they heard someone had given them some advice, and they were just asking, and so my response basically was, I don't know if there's one that's more important, but if I was forced to pick and give an answer, I would say character. The reason I would say that is I used Harry Potter as an example. the reason that pretty much everyone loves that story is because it's not a story about Voldemort and magic. That's not the story. The story is about Harry, who no one has ever loved him. He grew up without that, and he's just trying to fit in. That's what the story is. It's the story is Harry Potter trying to fit into the world around him and find someone to love him. And that is something we can all understand and all resonate with. And
Absolutely.
those are the kinds of things to me that make the story.
Yeah, it's it's funny, we talk a lot in writing and as authors about archetypal characters, archetypes, and we talk a lot about tropes, and we talk a lot about themes that get used regularly in structure, and all of those things are inputs into a story. And generally speaking, it starts and ends with the characters that are in your
Mm-hmm.
story. You want them to be relatable. You want people to understand them. They don't have to agree with them, but they
Mm-hmm.
we want them to understand, why is this person doing this or thing, if they're not a person per
Mm-hmm.
se, and can I relate to it? Thanos is the perfect example.
He's a great example.
Don't
Yeah.
agree with them, but you can say, okay, I understand why you might do that. I
Mm-hmm.
can, I think you're, obviously off the rocker, but he's understandable.
Yeah.
Doesn't I don't know if relatable is the right word, but you can usually make your protagonist relatable in a good way,
Mm-hmm.
to keep people interested. But even your villains need to be understandable.
Yeah. With Thanos is probably one of the best examples. I what I've always said about him is like I understand where he's coming from, and I also agree with that something should be done. What people should not agree with is how he chose to go about it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but understanding what he's trying to accomplish, like that makes perfect sense and is almost in a way a noble goal of he's trying to fix the problem. How
He
he
is.
wants to is the bad idea.
Yeah, he's a prime example of you know um, good intentions lead to the bad place.
Yeah.
Your good intention leads to a horrible, horrible thing, right? So it's like he is a good example of the fact that the way that you do things is important in a story.
Hmm. And
Because if
even another great example is Darth Vader. He's one of the most beloved villains of all time. I think the reason for that though is, I mean, he's a cool villain, of course, but he's the victim. He's the victim of the whole story. He was a good kid who fought in a war and was a war hero, and he like was this great person who was taken advantage of and turned to the dark side. And so again, it's like you can understand where he's coming from. You can empathize with him, even though he becomes this horrible character.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, and I like it to see multi-dimensional characters. Like my protagonist Dre, um, does not always do good things. He's in
Hmm.
an army, and so inherently, that involves fighting, usually to the death. And so you could say just morally that he has to do things that are not okay.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the crux of military fantasy. Um, he's defending his nation and doing the best that he can to get back to his life and the kingdom. But you know, you have to go about those things in an honorable way as best you
Hmm.
can in a bad situation sometimes. And how we get there is always the interesting part of the story, right? It's the
Yeah,
twists and turns that we take and how we tell it.
that's what I feel like. Brandon Sanderson balances that well, like in the Stormlight Archive with his characters Kaladin and Dalinar, especially. They're trying to do the right thing, but in the process of that, they do a lot of shady things, and it's just part of the story. But none of us are perfect, and we make mistakes, and that's again what makes it relatable and understandable for people.
Yeah, Lee Child talks about that I think it may be his BBC class, his master class on writing. He says, you can't let your character become the Superman and become
Hmm.
stronger and better and stronger and better. You need to make sure that they are fallible, that they can make mistakes, and that they can learn from them. And that is what makes it interesting.